Hey, welcome to today's marketing show. I have to be honest, Louella, I've been so looking forward to speaking with you. I followed your work as an industry analyst in the print sector for years. I know you have a global view on things and you work with, UK, European and American print providers. I have to ask you though, most people in my audience would want to know, okay, who exactly is this lady and how did you come up with Quocirca or Quocirca? How you pronounce it exactly? I know a lot of people have an issue with that. Sorry, but tell us about yourself and your company.
Well, it's great to be here today, Rick. I really appreciate you inviting me on the show. And I know we've been trying to do this for a while. So, really looking forward to our conversation. So my background, like you say, many of your audience may not know. So I have been in the print industry for over 30 years. And part of that career was working for Canon Europe for about 11 years as an ISV relations manager. So I worked very closely with their software development team and in the sort of business solutions products in the late 90s, early noughties. So Quocirca really came about was I left Canon. I had young children at the time, and at that time there was no flexible working, so it's all changed now. So I decided to do some freelance work, and I joined Quocirca, and it's Quocirca, and basically means therefore and another Latin word, but I can't take responsibility for the name because it was already owned before I joined. So I joined as an associate. And in 2018, the original founders retired and I took over the company and just focused the company on print. And really the genesis was my time at Canon, where I saw there was a bit of a gap in the market in terms of future thinking research. So not just looking backwards and excuse me, saying that there was market share, certain market shares for different vendors, but really looking at what do buyers want and how is the industry evolving. And that's really where I've developed, I guess, a niche for Quocirca. So that's the background.
A
And
niche to say the least. I'm just going to show on the screen here. I'll get everybody guys to show some of the awesome stats that you provide the industry that I know are very valued by the print dealers, we'll call it, that we work with. I'm just going to show a glimpse here as well. Your podcast, I think you have a really strong array of guests that I'll call it get it in the print industry and have meaningful conversations, right through to your recent post here, your Halloween post on what is it, the Nightmare on Print Street, that
yeah.
is a must read for any print dealer. So you see things on a global lens, and I think most of our client base is a U.S. based copier dealer that is probably wrestling with a little bit around, hey, I've been selling A3 for a long time. This A4 trend's come out, distributed work or work from home. I'm just wondering if you could speak to all the data or data, depending on where you live, that you see. What are some of the trends that you think copier dealers or print providers should be thinking about heading into 2026? Like, what are the main things that you see?
Yeah, great question. And I think it's an interesting one for everyone in the industry, from the OEMs, ISVs, and dealers and channel partners. And certainly we see because we do quite a bit of research with the channel, both in the US and Europe. And one of the key challenges we see that channel partners have is sometimes not getting the support they need from their vendor partners for insight into the market, which is something that Quocirca obviously offers, but also understanding the trends around security, which I would say was the number one area that we see is going to really have an impact on the industry going forward. And it's already been an area that many OEMs and channel partners have been focusing on. But I would say definitely security and compliance. Obviously, we can't have a conversation without discussing AI. But I would say with AI, and I heard a really good analogy recently, it's a bit like being given a Ferrari and not being told how to drive it. And I think that's a really good example of how AI is being used in the industry at the moment. We've got AI in certain aspects around machine learning for predictive service and support, but that's nothing new to the industry. But in terms of AI, it's still something that a lot of companies are experimenting with, but I do think channel partners who move ahead of the curve in terms of using it more in their companies to automate tasks and also improve their marketing as well through AI can really see the benefits. So I think AI will be a big one going forward. And the other one, so there's two more actually. One is digitization and workflow. So again, nothing new to the industry, but I do think that there's opportunities now with OEMs and ISVs having different solutions in this space to really go in with a sort of digitization first approach. And finally, sustainability. And I think the environment, obviously, we've seen in our recent research actually in the US, unsurprisingly, it's moved further down the agenda than it is in Europe. But I think there's still opportunities for cost savings and improvements by offering sustainability-led propositions. So I think that's some of the key trends we see going forward. But security, I would say, security and AI are the big ones.
And do you see a difference now? You're seeing a global lens here. I'm just wondering if you see a different trends emerging in different ways, let's say in the UK market versus the US market. Do you see one ahead or behind in any way?
Yeah, I see the US. So our surveys, which again, is probably
Mm,
not widely known, but all our research surveys cover the US and Europe. So we've got really good insight into
mm,
some of the trends that are happening specifically in the US market. And IT decision makers, or those buyers, those print buyers, are more confident in growing their business than perhaps in Europe, but they're also more concerned around certain areas. And so one of the areas I would say that US buyers, also US organizations from SMBs to large enterprises are further ahead is around cybersecurity. So they're investing in cybersecurity. They recognize the potential threats as well from AI, and they really want solutions from their channel partners that can help them mitigate those risks, and definitely further ahead than in Europe. The UK is not far behind, but some other regions in Europe would be
mm,
further behind.
mm,
Secondly, the shift from A3 to A4 is stronger, I would say, in the US.
mm,
It's happening in different areas across Europe, and Europe is a very fragmented and diverse market. So it really depends. Retail tends to be moving much quicker to distributed environments and has always been more
mm.
distributed. But we do see the US ahead on that in that area around that sort of A3 to A4 shift.
We see that well, and as you and I spoke, like we do sales training and marketing for the print dealers that are selling, print plus additional services. So we see the same shift kind of, to the A4, and the A4s are now so much more capable than before. When you mentioned AI, though, like I'd be curious, are there specific examples that if you're a dealer, a print dealer, print provider right now, that maybe, there's a list of things or something that you see the best ones doing in terms of using AI? So for example, auto toner fulfillment to me would be an example of an automation, whether you call it AI or automation. I'm just wondering if there's other examples, because I think a lot of dealers say, hey, they're having a hard time, I think, connecting AI to the practical implementation of print provision, service, etc. So I don't know if you have like specific examples of how they're using AI, Luella.
Yeah, definitely. So we see, I totally agree. I think with AI, there's the sense that we should be using it. As the channel partners, know that they should be using it, but they don't often have that AI literacy that perhaps other sort of larger OEMs and ISVs are actually using it within their products. So I'd say, firstly, predictive service, as you mentioned, around automated consumables management. But that really relies on the channel partners either having their own proprietary tools that builds that machine learning capability in, or they're working with partners. So I would say very much with AI, if channel partners are looking to use AI, not to try and build it from the ground up, to partner with ISVs and OEMs who've already got those capabilities. But the other areas that we're seeing from an end user perspective that they believe AI should be used in MFPs is around security. So having MFPs that have AI built in to identify a device compromise, identify an anomaly on a device, that protects that device from risk. That's a really great opportunity, and we do see some OEMs like HP and Canon that have that capability built in. So I think a lot of it is for the dealers to leverage those capabilities and position those solutions as AI-enabled solutions that they can use. The other area is around minimizing wasteful printing. And again, sustainability, I appreciate, is not top of mind, perhaps for a lot of US dealers. But actually, if you can develop the AI solutions that analyze what's being printed, and it can be quite rudimentary and double-sided printing instead of single-sided and so on, optimizing ink, they can actually minimize wasteful printing, and that can have a benefit on the cost reduction for those customers. And I always think with AI, it's an interesting one because they say again, you hear, your job's not going to be replaced by AI, it's going to be replaced by somebody using AI. And I think it's the same with channel partners. Just try and embed AI into your products and services that you're already using from OEMs, but also understand that one thing that we see is that organizations who are further ahead, so from their customer perspective, their customers who are further ahead on AI adoption are also more likely to be digitizing their paper-based processes and printing less. So the dealers really need to understand that they need to help those customers digitize those environments and not just always focus on those boxes and cost per page and printing, because that's quite an archaic model today.
I have to tell you, it's really refreshing for me, again, who works with print providers every day, to have you go down that list of AI. You talked about, like, in terms of how it can enhance the print environment, predictive service, the supplies, fulfillment component, security often built in, and minimizing, predictive service. You mentioned some things there, specifics, and I don't think, if I asked 100 print dealers right now how you're using AI to sell your print solution, I don't know if of 100, I don't know if I'd find five that right now have that part of their value proposition. And this is why I think some of your research is really meaningful, in that you need to have some understanding of how to connect, we'll call it a feature or a trend or a capability, to that end user in terms of what the impact is at the end user. What I'm saying in short is, if I read 100 print brochures of products, I'm wondering, if there's enough in there with the hunger for AI right now. When we do webinars, Louella, right now, we're doing webinars for dealers, print dealers, like AI meets paper, AI meets security, AI meets whatever, because we've got the AI, the popularity in there. And I just thought it was really cool what you went through there. Thanks for that, because I think a lot of print providers haven't made that connection to the specifics, and if they have, how are they communicating it to the end user? Great
And the other
answer.
thing, and the other
Yeah.
thing I wanted to add, actually, it's interesting you mentioned about your webinars there and that paper aspect, because the other aspect of using AI is around capture and scan. So using AI to analyze what's on that document and identify which business processes those documents that are scanned
Yeah.
integrate with, and so on. And I think, again, that's all about working with the right software partners and OEMs who have those capabilities. But I think with AI, it's very much productivity tool, isn't it? So
Yes.
it's about using it internally as well as how you position solutions that are AI
Yeah.
enabled.
Now, are you seeing, you mentioned scanning there. Often in some of the threads, I see dealers asking, for trend lines on scanning is it increasing? How do they bill for scans, of course? But what are you seeing when it comes to scanning at the print device or the MFP?
Yeah, really interesting question. Actually, we've got a report coming out on just this topic in a month or so, and we see that there is definitely more appetite for scanning based contracts, even within MPS, to have a cost per scan, because MPS customers are already used to that model. But the problem is they're used to getting scanning for free, so it's quite challenging for the dealers and the channel partners to then monetize those scans. But we are seeing that increasingly becoming more of a area of interest from an end user perspective, because obviously print volumes are flat to declining, and scanning, we believe, offers that new margin opportunity and new revenue opportunity for channel partners. And we are seeing scan volumes increasing quite significantly, which is kind of offsetting the print volumes. So I think there's an opportunity for MPS contracts to be, because they're still very, very traditional, and I think there's a real opportunity to innovate within those contracts, maybe sort of build in some scan cost per page capabilities within those contracts and actually start changing that so that, while the print revenues are falling and the cost per
Hmm.
page
Hmm.
doesn't perhaps offer the same opportunity, revenue margins to shift that to scan. So I think that's a significant opportunity.
And I know some of the print providers have got a cost per scan built in there because when we work with sales teams, we talk about basically there's two things that are going to come out the right or left side of the machine. We'll call it. One's going to be a piece of paper, the other's a digital document. And how are you basically capturing revenue and or building a business around either one of those? So as you talk about some of the trends happening, if you're a dealer right now, a print provider, and you're heading into 2026, okay, and you're trying to figure out what would be kind of the biggest opportunities for me to sustain or grow my print business, what might be, if I was to ask you for maybe three things that you think they should go all in on when it comes to their print business?
So number one, as I mentioned before, is cybersecurity. And the
Hmm.
opportunity there is to build in print security assessments for
Hmm.
customers, particularly those that are operating a mixed fleet, because we see with our research that customers who have a multi-vendor fleet, so different brands and so on, they're more likely to be challenged with securing those devices and also suffering more data loss incidents. And often it's just through the fact that they're not implementing
Hmm.
simple things like secure printing. So that solutions opportunity, and that's been around for some time, but I think it's becoming, customers are becoming more aware of it. And a lot of OEMs are really pushing it now. So I think channel partners who aren't already on that security journey really need to build in assessments as a fee-based service for customers.
Could I ask you, I'm not convinced a lot of print dealers know what a print security assessment looks like. And I don't know if you've seen in your research kind of what that would include. Have you,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, it's a bit like the traditional document assessments that
Hmm. Hmm.
MPS providers would do to rationalize the fleet, make recommendations, and then optimize that fleet environment. So it's looking at all the devices in a fleet, identifying if any of them have got security vulnerabilities, if they're outdated devices, if they
Hmm.
don't have the latest firmware,
Hmm.
and just making sure those devices are as up to date as possible, because often it's the old device on the network which is the weakest link. So it's often through discovery tools using DCA
Hmm.
products or discovery platforms that can actually analyze those devices. And I would say most dealers have got those capabilities because they're already doing it for
Hmm.
MPS.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's a case of saying, you've got a certain percentage of devices that need to be changed because they don't have the latest security updates. And today we're seeing more device compromises through devices being attacked or even sort of via PDF documents and phishing and social engineering. And I think even though it doesn't happen as often as perhaps the traditional kind of cyber attacks, if it
Hmm.
does happen, it means those devices can be harnessed to access the broader network. So I think it's all about positioning those assessments around helping their customers reduce risk. It's all about outcomes based.
So this is why I wanted to talk to you is because I think people get a lot of the high end terms like print security, but I can assure you if I went again to 100 print dealer websites, their call to action is to get a print assessment. And I think very few of them are offering a print security assessment to the end user, which we all know security is a high priority for the C level, yada, yada, yada. So I just think this is a big opportunity. I agree with you, and I don't think most dealers right now have, for lack of a better, a checklist of things that they would take a customer through to say, hey, look, you're good on these three, but these seven. And I thought your recent post, by the way, if you're not following Louella on LinkedIn, I highly recommend it. Like your recent post on that Nightmare on Prince Street, where you talked about the difference between a multi-brand fleet versus kind of a one brand. I thought that was a really interesting stat that I don't think a lot of dealers think about in terms of when they're trying to acquire an account, respond to an RFP, et cetera. So again, I'm not trying to sell you on this podcast, but I do think that there's a lot of information out there around print, but some of it, I don't know if it's really going to turn your crank in terms of helping you start, advance, or win a deal. And that's kind of what I liked about your content. So focus points for, again, a print dealer. Three things in 2026. You're saying print security assessment. I love that one. What else would you say would be an opportunity?
So number two is cloud migration. So the today, sort of, as you mentioned earlier, so we're moving very much more to this hybrid workplace environment and remote workers connecting via the
Hmm.
cloud to devices and so on. And what we're seeing is that there's a lot of momentum building around the cloud print market and adoption, but
Hmm.
also a lot of ISVs. So, you've got Vasion, MyQ, Papercut. I'm going to miss one out probably, but there's so many different ISVs, and I really recommend working with, if they're not already working with those ISVs, really look at Tungsten Automation is another one which has hybrid cloud platform offerings as well, and helping those customers on that cloud journey. And I think one of the challenges with dealers today is having that IT expertise to have those conversations, because what we're seeing with customers in our research is that the number one thing they want from an MPS provider is cybersecurity expertise, and number two, it's IT expertise. So being able to have those conversations around, are you in the public cloud, the private cloud, or still on premise? How can we help you reduce your costs by reducing your reliance on those on premise servers? If you eliminate those, you save costs, you save energy, and
Hmm.
we can actually help your, better manage those devices as well via the cloud. So I still feel that a lot of dealers aren't fully on that journey. And so, so number two would be helping your customers migrate to cloud print solutions.
Okay, I'm agreeing 100% with what you're saying. And again, I would challenge if I'm a print dealer, am I communicating this to my end user as opposed to, hey, we can do 40 pages a minute. This is your cost for mono. This is your cost for color. Yes, we've got these features. And I don't mean to minimize it, but I don't know if there's enough dealers speaking competently about the whole cloud opportunity. What would be your third, if I may ask?
Yeah, so number three, as I mentioned, digital workflow automation with a
Hmm.
bit of sustainability thrown in, because I've only got three. But one
Hmm.
thing that we see in our research is that the top driver, even in some US companies for digitization, is sustainability, and it's to reduce waste and to reduce paper usage. And
Hmm.
even though sustainability may be lower on the agenda, organizations still have to comply with certain regulations,
Hmm.
particularly in Europe. And positioning, depending on, the markets, I would say developing a workflow service, again going back to those assessments, understanding that whole print to scan
Hmm.
process that your customers are using,
Hmm.
and identifying which workflow automation tools can be used. So all my suggestions are really not around selling the hardware, because the other thing we're seeing is that many organizations are also trying to keep their devices for longer, because during COVID a lot of
Hmm.
devices weren't being used and print volumes fell off a cliff, and now
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
lot of MPS contracts really need to build in that longevity around
Hmm.
hardware.
Hmm.
So I would say, workflow automation is number three,
Okay.
and yeah, and sometimes that's driven by sustainability.
Hmm. We've done a lot of work in the past with different sustainability providers, we'll call it, whether it's remanufactured toner cartridges or remanufactured products. And we found that the appetite for sustainability obviously differs. It depends on the customer whether they place a value on it. But I would agree with you that the digital workflow is something that we see huge growth opportunity, especially with the advent of AI. And so, you mentioned end user perspective, and I know your research covers, kind of a go to market and then a reverse lens from the end user perspective. So, could you just, maybe the last question I wanted to ask you here is, what are you finding that end users are asking for most that dealers should be absolutely thinking about to connect their offering to what their customers want based on the insights you have? What do end users want?
Yeah, so with end users, there's, as I mentioned, there's obviously security,
Hmm. Hmm.
workflow automation, and sustainability. But one
Yeah.
interesting thing around the paper document and printing is that, and I think we can acknowledge it's not going away. We're kind of
Hmm.
moving to this less paper office rather than paperless office.
Hmm. Hmm.
And we're seeing a big generational change. So obviously in the workplace now we have five generations, and the Generation Z, or Generation Z, as you say over there, that are
Hmm.
coming into the workplace. We're actually seeing that they're not as dismissive of print as we might think they are. So obviously they're digital natives and they're used to working in digital environments and they expect seamless connectivity and they're mobile app driven and so on. But when we've asked a particular sort of 18 to 34 age group, they still think print will be important by 2030. And it's really important that at the same time, some brands, the OEM brands, aren't resonating with them because they're very traditional brands. So it tends to be the brands like HP and Canon who are very strong with those age groups and companies. Xerox are doing a bit better in that space. I think they've done a lot, around their sort of marketing and so on. But some of the, I'd say the Japanese-based companies don't always resonate as well as with that younger age group. And it's really important to resonate and be relevant to those decision makers because eventually they will be coming into more influential positions in the organization and they need to understand the value of print and scan and capture. So that's a big change we're seeing is that actually the older generation, which I put myself in that category, where more kind of, print is dead and it's just going. Whereas the younger generation are like, no, we'll use paper when it's of value to us. Just as a side note, my son is flying to the US tomorrow and he needed to have his ESTA and he wanted to print it out and it was just kind of like a backup thing that he wanted to have and he's 26 and I think he prints a lot. He's a film director so he actually prints a lot of scripts and so on. I think there's still an opportunity for print in that younger generation and I think the dealers really need to be aware of that generational change and not just assume that print is dying. There's still opportunity there.
So I was at the airport one time and someone told me, Rick, why do you print your ticket? And then when their phone died, I showed them why I printed my ticket.
Paper never runs out of battery.
Not to my knowledge. Hey, it's been awesome speaking with you. And I can see why so many of the OEMs and the distributors and the dealers, subscribe to your content or pay for your premium content, which is awesome. If you were a print provider, what would you suggest I do to follow what you're doing? Because I know I follow you and I learn and I look through your lens to help our customers. But what would you suggest if I'm a print provider in the US market or the UK do to connect with what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, follow me on LinkedIn, go to quocirca.com and obviously our YouTube channel. I think we're nearly at our 100th episode there now. So that was something that started in one of the first lockdowns and it's taken a life of its own. But I have some really great guests on there. So I'm very fortunate.
Good.
Had some great conversations and our reports we do provide some a lot of complementary research which you can go to you can see our print security landscape infographics and go to our reports store. You can download some of the executive summaries and also speak to your OEMs because often if the OEMs are clients they may have licenses to share that with their channel partners. So yeah, definitely recommend go to our website and our YouTube channel and follow me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and I'll just show again on the screen here your print security, like some of the infographics you do, because if you're a dealer and you think this is good, you should see what's behind the curtain, whether your OEM subscribes or whatever. Like it's very meaningful and I think impactful for end users. And oh, by the way, it doesn't have the brand of the copier logo in the corner. It's a credible third-party source with insights. So hey, Louella, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your insights on this marketing show. And trust me, follow Louella. You're going to benefit from that if you have anything to do with print. Great job today. Thanks again for your insights.
Thanks so much. It's a real pleasure.